The sleek trading vessel Lucky Strike glided through the shimmering docking shields of Station Nexus 7, its worn hull bearing the proud markings of Earth's merchant fleet. Captain Emily Martinez stood at the bridge viewport, her weathered hands clasped behind her back as she watched the massive station's docking clamps secure her ship. The familiar metallic thunk echoed through the hull, a sound she'd heard countless times across a dozen systems. "Docking complete, Captain," First Officer James Kelly reported from his station, his fingers dancing across the holographic controls. Station atmospherics matched and holding steady. Emily nodded, allowing herself a small smile. "Right on schedule. Alert the crew. Standard rotation for station leave. I want someone watching the cargo bay at all times." She turned to face her bridge crew, noting their eager expressions. Nexus 7 was a favorite stop among her people, known for its exotic entertainment and relatively friendly alien population. Meanwhile, in the station's bustling commercial district, Vexilor adjusted their chromatic scales to project a more trustworthy pattern. Soft blues with hints of diplomatic gold. The young Scatheri merchant had spent 3 cycles preparing for this opportunity, studying human trading patterns and psychological weaknesses. Their species prided themselves on being master traders, but humans were notoriously difficult to deceive. Something about their evolution made them surprisingly adept at detecting falsehoods. But Vexilor had developed a new approach. Their research suggested humans relied heavily on emotional cues during negotiations. By manipulating their chromatophores to project specific color patterns, they believed they could bypass human intuition entirely. The arrival of the Lucky Strike provided the perfect test subject. Such careful preparation, a soft voice whispered in their mind. Such attention to detail, all to break the sacred rule. Vexilor spun around, their scales flickering to alarmed crimson before they could control the reaction. 3 enforcement guardians stood there, their crystalline forms pulsing with barely contained energy. The lead guardian, their core glowing with ancient power, stepped forward. I wasn't going to harm them," Vexilor protested, trying to regain their diplomatic coloring. "It's just business." "Deception is harm." The Guardian's voice resonated directly in Vexilor's mind. "Theft is harm. Any action that diminishes a human's well-being falls under the sacred rule." The crystalline being's form shifted, edges becoming sharper, more threatening. "You were warned twice before about approaching their vessels." In the distance, Vexilor could see Captain Martinez and her crew emerging from their ship. They moved with the easy confidence of people who felt completely safe, joking among themselves as they prepared for shore leave. The humans had no idea that their simple presence had triggered the station's highest security protocols. The lead guardian's grip was impossibly strong as they pulled Vexilor away from the trading floor. "You are young, so you will receive one final warning. But understand this, the sacred rule exists for reasons beyond your comprehension. It is not about politics or economics or even morality. It is about survival. The survival of every non-human species in the galaxy." Vexilor's scales rippled with confusion. "But they're so ordinary. I studied them. They have no special abilities, no advanced technology we haven't surpassed. They're not even particularly strong compared to many species." The Guardian's crystalline form flickered with what might have been amusement or fear. "You see their ships, their trades, their daily lives. You do not see what happened to the last species that tried to subjugate them. The Krell-Vol were a warrior race that spanned 300 systems. Now they're extinct. Their entire civilization collapsed into madness and death after a single failed invasion of Earth." The Guardian released Vexilor, their form beginning to fade. "Consider this curiosity of yours carefully, young one. Some questions are better left unasked. Some mysteries are better left unsolved. The humans go about their lives, ignorant of the true reason they're protected. That ignorance is a gift, to them, and to us all." As the Guardians disappeared, Vexilor watched Captain Martinez purchase a cup of steaming coffee from a vendor, laughing at some joke her first officer had made. The human woman's eyes met theirs for a moment, and she offered a friendly nod before continuing on her way. Such an ordinary gesture from such an apparently ordinary species. Yet somewhere in the galaxy, the remains of the mighty Krellville Empire drifted as silent testimony to why humans must never, ever be harmed. The information archives of Station Nexus 7 hummed with quantum processors, endless streams of data flowing through crystalline matrices. Vexlor sat at a public terminal. Their scales shifted to scholarly gray as they sifted through publicly available records of human trade routes. But that wasn't what they were really studying. In the corner of their display, a decryption program quietly worked through the station's security protocols. 3 weeks of careful observation had revealed a pattern in the archive's defense systems, a microscopic lag every time the station's primary sensors conducted their sweep of the human quarter. Fascinating choice of research, a voice said behind them. Particularly the hidden program in your tertiary visual spectrum. Vexlor's scales flickered in alarm before they could control the reaction. They turned to find a human male watching them with curious eyes. He wore the blue uniform of the station's scientific division, and a badge identified him as Dr. Jack Thompson, Xenobiology Department. I don't know what you're talking about, Vexlor said, trying to close the programs discreetly. Really? Because that decryption sequence you're running looks remarkably similar to one I tried 6 months ago. Thompson pulled up a chair, his movement casual but his eyes sharp. I'm more interested in why Isktheri Merchant is investigating disappeared ships near human space. Vexlor's secondary heart skipped a beat. That data was supposed to be hidden behind 3 layers of encryption. You're mistaken, human. I'm simply looking into the Stellar Voyager incident, or maybe the Bright Horizon mystery. 7 ships, all conducting perfectly legal research operations near human space, all vanished without a trace. Thompson leaned forward, lowering his voice, all carrying specialized equipment for studying human neural patterns. Vexlor felt their scales ripple with surprise. How do you know about that? Because I designed some of that equipment. Thompson glanced around before continuing. Every proposal I submit for studying human neurological responses gets approved initially, then mysteriously denied at the highest levels. Every time I try to conduct even basic research on human neural patterns, the equipment disappears or malfunctions. A cleaning drone whirred past their terminal, and both of them fell silent until it passed. Vexlor studied the human's face, searching for signs of deception, but finding only carefully controlled frustration. 3 days ago, Thompson continued, I filed a request to study human empathic responses. Nothing invasive, just standard brainwave monitoring during normal social interactions. The request was denied before I even finished submitting it. The system blocked it based on keywords alone. Vexlor's scales shifted to deep purple, their species color of intense thought. The Guardians stopped me from conducting business with humans. They said it was about survival, not just protecting humans, but protecting everyone else from something. Thompson nodded slowly. I found references in old medical files, cases of alien species experiencing mass psychological trauma after conflicts with humans. But the details are always redacted, the files corrupted or deleted. The Krellville, Vexlor whispered. The Guardians mentioned them. Said their entire civilization collapsed after trying to invade Earth. I've seen that name in fragments of classified files. Thompson pulled out a small data chip. Look at this. A holographic display flickered to life between them, showing a star chart. Dozens of systems were marked in red, forming a rough sphere around Earth. These are quarantine systems, Thompson explained. Former Krellville territory. No one's allowed in, officially due to psychological hazards left over from their civilization's collapse. But I managed to get one scan through their perimeter. He highlighted one system, and a new image appeared. A massive Krellville dreadnought, perfectly intact, drifting in space. No signs of weapons fire, Vexlor observed. No battle damage at all. Exactly. The ship's systems were functional. Life support was running. But the crew, Thompson's voice trailed off. The autopsy reports described it as total psychological dissolution. Their minds just broke. All at once, a shadow fell across their terminal. They looked up to find Captain Martins walking past, laughing with her crew as they returned from shore leave. Her presence sent nearby aliens scurrying respectfully out of her path, though she seemed not to notice. "Something happened during first contact," Thompson said quietly, watching the humans pass. "Something that made the entire galaxy agree to a single, unbreakable rule. And I think..." The terminal suddenly went dark. When it reactivated, all their research was gone, replaced by a single message. Final warning. Further investigation will result in immediate exile. Vexlor and Thompson shared a look. They both knew they should stop, walk away, forget everything they'd discovered. They both knew they wouldn't. The Phoenix Lounge occupied the highest level of Station Nexus 7, its panoramic windows offering a breathtaking view of the swirling nebula beyond. General Amanda Cooper sat alone at the bar, her cybernetic hand wrapped around a glass of Centaurian brandy. The synthetic skin couldn't quite hide the military-grade combat enhancements underneath. Vexlor approached carefully. Their scales shifted to match the lounge's subdued lighting. Dr. Thompson had gone ahead with their plan, securing a private booth away from curious ears. Now came the difficult part. "General Cooper." Vexlor kept their voice respectful. "I'm a historian researching first contact events. Your name appears in several redacted files about..." "No." The general didn't even look up from her drink. Her cybernetic eye glowed faintly as it scanned Vexlor. "Whatever clearance you think you have, whatever clever questions you've prepared, the answer is no." "The Krellville Dreadnought," Vexlor said quietly. "We found it." The glass in Cooper's cybernetic hand shattered. Several nearby patrons turned to look, but quickly averted their eyes when they recognized her uniform. The general's organic eye fixed on Vexlor with terrifying intensity. "Private booth," she growled. "Now." They made their way to where Thompson waited. The general's cybernetic legs moved with unnatural smoothness, a reminder of just how much of her original body had been replaced. She slid into the booth, and a privacy field hummed to life around them. "You're both idiots," Cooper said, her organic hand shaking slightly as she reached for Thompson's untouched drink. "The kind of idiots who get entire species wiped out because they can't leave well enough alone. We need to understand." Thompson leaned forward. "The disappeared ships, the blocked research, the quarantine systems. You want to understand." Cooper's laugh held no humor. "I commanded the third wave of the Liberation Fleet. 30 ships, finest crews in the galaxy, sent to free humanity from what we thought was their primitive isolation. We were so certain, so righteous in our cause." She drained the glass. 2 hours after we engaged the first human vessels, my entire command staff was screaming in the medbay. Vexlor's scales rippled with confusion. "From human weapons. If only it were that simple." Cooper's organic eye unfocused, lost in memory. "Every injury we inflicted, every casualty we caused, we felt it. Not just physically. We experienced their fear, their pain, their desperation." Perfect empathic reflection. By the third hour, my gunners were crying every time they fired, feeling the terror of their targets. By the fourth hour, 3 of my ship captains had taken their own lives, driven mad by the deaths they'd caused. Thompson's face had gone pale. "That's impossible. Humans don't have that kind of empathic ability. We'd know if..." "You don't have it consciously," Cooper cut him off. "It's a defensive adaptation, operating below the level of awareness. The worse the harm intended, the stronger the reflection." She looked at her cybernetic arm. "I ordered a direct strike on a civilian transport. The reflected trauma burned out my entire nervous system. The doctors had to replace everything that shut down." A group of human merchants walked past their booth, laughing and chatting. Cooper watched them with a mix of respect and fear. The Krellville refused to believe our reports. They thought they'd found a perfect weakness, If humans weren't aware of their power, they couldn't consciously use it. The Krell Vault launched a full invasion of Earth with over 1,000 ships. The quarantine systems, Vexlor whispered. Cooper nodded. The reflection cascaded through their entire species. Every human death echoed through their collective consciousness. Their civilization collapsed in less than a week. Those who survived, she shuddered. The lucky ones are still in stasis, trapped in endless loops of reflected trauma. She fixed them both with a hard stare. The sacred rule isn't about protecting humans. It's about protecting everyone else. Even now, after all these years, I still wake up feeling phantom echoes of the pain I caused. The guilt, the fear, her voice trailed off as her cybernetic eye began to spark erratically. General. Thompson reached for her, but she waved him away. You have your answer, she said, standing unsteadily. Now forget it. Forget all of it. Because if humanity ever becomes fully aware of their power, she looked out at the laughing merchants. Their innocence is what keeps us all safe. The privacy field dropped and General Cooper walked away, her cybernetic parts twitching with remembered trauma. Behind her, Vexlor and Thompson sat in stunned silence, finally understanding the true weight of their discovery. The first explosion rocked Station Nexus 7 just as Vexlor and Dr. Thompson left the Phoenix Lounge. Emergency shields snapped into place across the viewport windows, blocking out the nebula's brilliant colors. Through the station's hull came the distinctive vibration of multiple ships docking without authorization. Crimson Void, a nearby merchant, cursed, their tentacles curling in fear. They're supposed to be in the outer rim. The station's security alert began broadcasting in 15 languages. Among them, a specific warning repeated more urgently than the others. All civilians are advised to avoid Sector 7. Human quarters are now a restricted zone. Do not, under any circumstances. A second explosion cut off the transmission. They're hitting the human residential areas, Thompson said, his face pale. Don't they know the rules? Vexlor's scales shifted to alarm red, or they don't care. After what General Cooper told us. The main corridor's doors burst open. A group of heavily armed figures stormed through, led by a massive Drachnid cyborg. His organic eye glowed with augmented targeting systems, while his mechanical parts seemed cobbled together from a dozen different species technology. I am Skarchik of the Crimson Void, his voice boomed through implanted speakers. This station is now under our control. Resist, and we space the hostages. Behind him, his crew herded a group of terrified civilians. Vexlor noticed the pirates were carefully keeping their non-human hostages between themselves and the humans they'd captured. They knew enough to use living shields, at least. Station security forces arrived, their weapons drawn but not firing. The lead officer, a Venethian warrior whose species was known for their fearlessness, visibly trembled at the sight of human hostages in the pirates' grip. You have no idea what you're doing, the security chief said, her voice shaking. Release the humans. Whatever you want, we can negotiate. Skarchik laughed, the sound distorted by his vocal processors. Negotiate. The mighty Station Nexus 7, brought to its knees by a few soft humans. He grabbed one of the hostages, and Vexlor recognized Lieutenant Ryan Cooper, still in his dress uniform from visiting his grandmother. Careful, one of Skarchik's own crew warned. The sacred rule is nothing but superstition. Skarchik tightened his cybernetic grip on Ryan's arm. I've spent years studying these creatures. They're not special. They're not powerful. They're just. He squeezed harder, and Ryan couldn't suppress a gasp of pain. The pirate who had spoken suddenly doubled over, clutching his arm. Others in the crew began shifting uncomfortably, rubbing their own arms in the same spot where their leader gripped Ryan. Status report. Skarchik barked at his crew. What's wrong with you? Sir, another pirate's voice shook. Something's happening. I can feel. Cowards. Skarchik's cybernetic parts whirred as he lifted Ryan off the ground. I'll show you there's nothing to fear from. General Cooper's voice cut through the standoff. Stop this. She emerged from a side corridor, her cybernetic parts still twitching from their earlier conversation. I've seen what happens next. You don't want this. The famous General Cooper, Skarchik sneered. I've read about you. The hero who lost her nerve, who helped create these ridiculous protection laws. His organic eye narrowed. Tell me, General, if humans are so dangerous, why haven't these ones done anything to stop us? Because they don't know they can. Cooper's organic eye held terrible knowledge. Their power only works if you attack first. But once you do, she looked at her grandson with a mix of love and fear. The reflection will drive you mad. Reflection. Skarchik laughed again. More myths. I'll show you reflection. He turned to his crew. Set charges throughout the human quarter. Let's test these powers they supposedly have. Sir, his second-in-command stepped forward, sweat visible on their scaled skin. The crew, we're all feeling strange, like something's pressing against our minds. Vexillor watched in horror as understanding dawned on their face. The pirates had already harmed humans during their initial assault. The reflection was beginning, and based on what Cooper had told them, it would only get worse. Thompson grabbed Vexillor's arm. We have to do something. If they keep hurting humans, the feedback loop will. We'll teach them why some rules exist for everyone's protection, Cooper said grimly, her cybernetic hand clenching into a fist. The only question is how many of them will survive the lesson. Dr. Thompson's research lab was a cluttered maze of mural scanning equipment and holographic displays. He and Vexillor had managed to slip away during the chaos, using maintenance tunnels to reach the science sector. Now, they watched in fascination as data streamed across the screens. This is impossible, Thompson muttered, adjusting the neural monitoring systems. The station's sensors are picking up synchronized brain patterns between the pirates and their hostages. Look at this wavelength correlation. Vexillor's scales shifted to deep purple as they studied the displays. The patterns are identical every time a pirate hurts a human. Their own neural pathways mirror the trauma. Thompson pointed to one particular reading. See this spike? That's from when Skarchik grabbed Lieutenant Cooper. The pain signals registered in both bodies simultaneously. The lab's main screen showed a real-time map of the station. Red dots indicated human life signs, while blue represented the pirates. Yellow lines connected them, growing thicker and brighter with each violent interaction. The effect is spreading, Vexillor noticed. Even pirates who haven't directly harmed humans are starting to show synchronized patterns. Thompson nodded grimly. It's like a psychic contagion. The shared trauma is bleeding through their neural networks, affecting their entire crew. He pulled up another display. And look at these temporal readings. The reflection delay is getting shorter. A security camera feed showed Skarchik pacing in the main concourse, his cybernetic parts twitching erratically. Several of his crew lay curled on the floor, clutching their heads. Lieutenant Cooper and the other hostages appeared physically unharmed, but every time the pirates roughly handled them, more of their captors collapsed. The cybernetics aren't protecting them, Thompson observed. If anything, the mechanical interfaces are amplifying the effect. Skarchik's neural readings are becoming increasingly chaotic. Vexillor's scales rippled with realization. That's why General Cooper's augmentations were malfunctioning. They're still carrying echoes of the original trauma. Exactly. Thompson brought up a historical file he'd apparently hidden in his private database. Look at these medical records from the Krellville invasion. As their forces approached Earth, the reflection effect intensified. By the time they actually engaged human targets, the data showed a cascading wave of neural collapse spreading through the Krellville fleet. Ship after ship went dark as entire crews succumbed to the reflected trauma of their own actions. Their hive mind physiology made it worse, Vexillor said, their scales paling. The feedback loop spread through their entire species. A sudden commotion on the security feed drew their attention. One of the pirates had started screaming, clawing at their own face. Make it stop, I can feel them all. Every human we hurt. Their fear. Their pain. Skarkik struck the hysterical crew member, but immediately staggered back, clutching his own face where he'd landed the blow. His organic eye was wild with growing comprehension. The reflection isn't just physical, Thompson whispered. It's everything. Emotion, sensation, consciousness itself. Pure empathic mirroring at the deepest neural level. New alarms began blaring throughout the station. On their displays, the yellow connection lines were now pulsing with increasing intensity. More pirates collapsed, their neural patterns synchronizing not just with their immediate victims, but with every human on the station. We need to warn them. Vexlor started toward the door. If they don't stop now, it's too late. Thompson's voice was heavy with understanding. The feedback loop has reached critical mass. Every moment they spend in contact with humans strengthens the effect, even if they release the hostages right now. The main screen showed Skarkik's neural patterns fracturing as the reflected trauma overwhelmed his cybernetic safeguards. His crew wasn't faring any better. Their minds buckled under the weight of thousands of perfectly mirrored human experiences. Now we know, Vexlor said softly. This is why the Guardians protect humans from harm, because anyone who harms them experiences exactly what they inflict. Thompson finished. Perfect justice, written into their very DNA. An evolutionary defense mechanism that makes empathy not just moral, but necessary for survival. On every screen, the neural patterns of the pirates continued to deteriorate, while their human hostages remained unchanged, unaware that their mere existence was driving their attackers to madness. The restricted archives were dark when Vexlor and Dr. Thompson arrived, emergency power casting everything in a dim red glow. Using access codes from Thompson's research credentials, they slipped inside while the station's crisis continued to unfold above them. We don't have much time, Thompson said, his fingers flying across the archival interface. The data corruption starts at the quantum level, like someone tried to erase history itself. Vexlor's scales shifted to match the darkness as they moved deeper into the archive. Look for anything about first contact. General Cooper said that's when everything changed. The holographic displays came alive around them, showing fragments of ancient recordings. The first human starships, primitive by modern standards, reaching out into the cosmos. The initial peaceful contacts with alien species, and then, there, Thompson pointed to a partially corrupted file. The Krellville invasion fleet entering Earth's solar system. The recording flickered to life, showing massive warships against the backdrop of Earth. Their weapons fired, and for a moment, victory seemed certain. Then something changed. The Krellville commanders began screaming, their neural networks overwhelmed by reflected trauma. The timestamps, Vexlor noticed. This was only the first wave. Play the next sequence. The hologram shifted to show the emergency session of the Galactic Council. Representatives from 100 species watched in horror as reports flooded in from the Krellville Empire. Entire planetary populations collapsed into catatonic states, their hive mind physiology spreading the reflected trauma like a psychic virus. We have to contain this, one council member argued. If word spreads about humanity's true nature, the humans themselves must never know, another agreed. Their ignorance is what makes the defense mechanism work. If they became aware of their power. A new recording began playing. Medical logs from the first scientific studies of human empathic reflection. Thompson's hands trembled as he read the data. It's exponential, he whispered. Every generation of humans since first contact has shown stronger reflection capabilities. The power is evolving, adapting. An alert flashed on their screens. Current neural readings from the station above. The pirates' mental patterns were deteriorating rapidly, the reflected trauma reaching critical levels. This is why the Guardians exist, Vexlor realized, not just to enforce the sacred rule, but to prevent anyone from discovering the truth. Because once you know about the reflection, you can't help but think about it when interacting with humans, Thompson finished, and that conscious awareness makes you susceptible to the effect. Even the most minor negative intention gets reflected back. They found another recording, this one showing the aftermath of the Liberation Fleet's attack. General Cooper, decades younger, gave her testimony to the council. The more we tried to fight it, the worse it became, her younger self reported, her original arms still intact. It's not just physical harm, it's any intention to diminish them. The more hostile the intent, the stronger the reflection. By the end, my gunners were experiencing the deaths of their targets before they even fired. The next file showed the council's final verdict, unanimous agreement to establish the sacred rule. Not a law, but a desperate measure for survival. All contact with humans must be peaceful, the council decreed. Their species will be protected, guided, but never threatened. The truth of their power must remain hidden from them and from the galaxy at large. Only a select few will know the real reason, bearing that burden so others may live in peace. Above them, the station shuddered. Emergency alerts flashed across their screens as Skarchik's neural patterns began to cascade into total collapse. "We have to destroy these records," Thompson said suddenly. "If humans ever discover this, if we become aware of our own power, it would change every interaction." Vexilor understood now. The weight of that knowledge would destroy the very innocence that makes the power work. They began purging the files, erasing the evidence of humanity's terrible gift. As they worked, they could hear the screams of the pirates echoing through the station, a reminder that some rules exist not as restrictions, but as warnings written in the blood of those who learned them too late. Red emergency lights pulsed through Station Nexus 7's main concourse as Lieutenant Ryan Cooper watched another of his captors collapse, clutching their head in agony. Skarchik's cybernetic parts sparked and twitched, his organic eye rolling wildly as he paced between his fallen crew members. "What's happening to them?" Ryan whispered to the elderly woman beside him, another human hostage who had remained remarkably calm throughout the crisis. "Neural cascade failure," she replied, her voice carrying the weight of medical expertise. "Their brains are shutting down from some kind of psychic feedback." In the science sector, Vexilor and Dr. Thompson raced through the corridors, their neural monitoring equipment showing devastating readings. "The reflection is reaching critical mass," Thompson said, checking the displays. "Every pirate connected to their ship's neural network is being affected. The feedback loop is spreading through their entire fleet." Vexilor's scales had gone almost white with fear, like the Krelvil. Their whole civilization. Station security to all sections, the emergency broadcast cut through their conversation. "The Crimson Void vessels are charging weapons. Primary hull breach imminent. All personnel, prepare for." Skarchik's voice overrode the channel, his vocal processors distorting with electronic interference. "No more games. Either this station surrenders full control, or I space every human aboard. Let's see how your precious sacred rule handles that." In the main concourse, Ryan looked at the fallen pirates, then at his grandmother's empty seat where she'd been sitting before the attack. The general's words from their earlier conversation echoed in his mind. Sometimes the greatest power lies in understanding when not to use it. He stood up slowly, drawing Skarchik's attention. "You're dying," he said quietly. "All of you, and you don't even understand why." "Shut up." Skarchik's cybernetic arm trembled as he pointed his weapon. "One more word and I'll—" "You'll what?" Ryan stepped forward. "Hurt me. Kill me. Look around you. Look what's happened to your crew just from the minor injuries they've inflicted. Imagine what something worse would do." In the security center, General Cooper watched the confrontation through surveillance feeds, her cybernetic parts sparking with remembered trauma. "No, Ryan," she whispered. "Don't make him understand. Don't make him see. Your neural patterns are already degrading." Ryan continued, remembering fragments of conversations he'd overheard from his grandmother's nightmares. "Every harm you cause circles back. Every pain you inflict becomes your own. That's why they made the rule." Skarchik's organic eye widened with terrible comprehension. The weapon in his cybernetic hand shook harder. In the science sector, Thompson stared at the neural readings in horror. The reflection. It's amplifying. His awareness of the effect is making it stronger. We have to stop this. Vexilor's scales flickered with panic. If he fully understands while still connected to his ship's neural network. Ryan took another step toward Skarchik. You wanted to know our weakness. This is it. We can't be harmed without our attackers suffering the same fate. Every injury, every death, every moment of fear or pain, perfectly mirrored back to the source. No. Skarchik stumbled backward, his cybernetic parts shorting out as the reflection intensified. No, that's not. You can't. The sacred rule exists to protect you. Ryan's voice was gentle now. Not us. We never needed protection. We just needed to stay innocent of our own power. And now, the neural cascade is spreading through their entire fleet, Thompson reported, watching in horror as ship after ship registered crew-wide psychological collapse. The reflection. It's never been this strong before. Because it's never been consciously understood by both sides at once, Vexilor realized. This is what the Council feared. This is why humans were never supposed to know. In the main concourse, Skarchik raised his weapon one final time, his mind fracturing under the weight of understanding. He knew now what would happen if he pulled the trigger. Knew the death he caused would echo back through his own consciousness. Knew it would spread through his neural network to every connected member of his species. Knew it, and couldn't stop himself from trying anyway. Ryan closed his eyes, accepting what would come next. Sometimes the only way to end violence was to let it destroy itself. The shot rang out. The shot never landed. Skarchik's cybernetic arm had exploded in a shower of sparks, the weapon clattering to the floor. He collapsed moments later, his organic eye rolling back as neural overload finally shut down his consciousness. Throughout the station, the remaining pirates fell into catatonic states, their minds shattered by the reflected trauma of their own intentions. 3 days later, Vexilor stood in the Phoenix Lounge, watching emergency crews clear the last of the Crimson Void ships from the station's docking rings. Their scales shifted between thoughtful purple and mournful blue as Dr. Thompson approached. The official report is complete, Thompson said quietly. Neural plague caused by faulty cybernetic interfaces. The Guardians have already approved the cover story. And the truth. Buried. General Cooper helped me purge the last of the archives. Even my own research data is gone. Thompson looked out at the nebula, its colors restored now that the emergency shields had retracted. It's better this way. At a nearby table, Ryan Cooper sat with his grandmother, both of them drinking coffee as if the past few days had been nothing more than an inconvenience. The general's cybernetic parts had been repaired, no longer twitching with old trauma. He doesn't remember, Thompson noticed. None of the humans do. Whatever he understood in that moment with Skarchik, it's gone now. Vexilor's scales rippled with amazement. Another defense mechanism. The ability to forget their own power. Has to be. The human mind protecting itself from knowledge that would change everything. Thompson sighed. The Guardians just finished processing the surviving pirates. Total psychological collapse. They'll spend the rest of their lives in medical stasis, trapped in loops of their own reflected violence. Like the Krelleval, Vexilor watched Ryan laugh at something his grandmother said. How can they be so normal after everything that happened? Because they have to be. Thompson's voice was firm. Their power only works because they don't know they have it. The moment humanity becomes aware of the reflection effect, every interaction would be tainted by that knowledge. Vexilor understood now. Every moment colored by the fear of causing harm, creating a feedback loop of anxiety that would tear apart their society and ours. Captain Martinez and her crew entered the lounge, still discussing trade routes as if nothing unusual had occurred. The aliens around them moved respectfully aside, their fear and awe carefully hidden behind diplomatic politeness. The sacred rule protects everyone, Thompson mused. Humans from harm, other species from the consequences of causing harm, and the entire galaxy from the chaos of humanity discovering its true nature. General Cooper looked up, catching their gaze. For a moment, her organic eye held the weight of terrible knowledge. Then she smiled, raised her coffee cup in salute, and returned to her conversation with Ryan. She remembers, Vexlor realized. She has to help enforce the rule. To bear the burden of knowing so others don't have to. Like the Guardians. Like us now. Thompson straightened his uniform. Speaking of which, the Council sent their decision this morning. You've been appointed as a junior Guardian, and I've been named Special Advisor to the Medical Division. Vexlor's scales shifted to surprised gold. They're not exiling us for investigating. Just the opposite. They want people who understand the stakes, who know why the rule exists but can still interact with humans normally. Thompson smiled sadly. It's not an easy balance. In the distance, the nebulous colors shimmered, reflecting off the hull of the Lucky Strike as it prepared for departure. Captain Martinez's crew loaded fresh supplies, joking and laughing with the dock workers. They would continue their trading runs, living their lives in blessed ignorance of how the galaxy really saw them. They're not really defenseless, Vexlor said softly. They're just innocent, and that innocence is the strongest defense of all. Thompson nodded, watching humanity's perfect camouflage. Their simple, peaceful existence masking a power that had brought empires to their knees. The sacred rule stands. Never harm the humans. Not because they can't protect themselves, but because they protect us all by remaining exactly as they are, Vexlor finished. Their scales settled into the deep blue of acceptance as they took up their new role. Another silent guardian of humanity's precious, powerful ignorance.